Hi, Liam O'Gogon here from the research program Does It Matter? Welcome to another episode in the case study in relation to the Central Statistics Office and extending into the Data Protection Office. So in this episode I want to interrogate the recording of a conversation I had with a person called Tony Downs on the 22nd of April 2016 when Tony called me at 11:58. Now, just to read us into the context again, I'm using dual resources on the screen here where I have put the waveform of the conversation or recording in there, and down below here I have the compiled document of the overall correspondence that I've been maintaining in relation to this thread. So just my first engagement with Tony Downs, I was informed about that he was going to carry out an internal review by Marcella Joyce, and I wrote to an address seeking Tony Downs on the 5th of April at 17:07. And in that document I specifically asked him to forward me copies of whatever interaction, including all records and all formats of our communication, Marcella has had with you in regard to this matter. So I needed to read myself into whatever data set he was working with, having been handed to him by Marcella Joyce. And then secondly, I said, please also explain your role in the present process and provide me with any links which define your role and any procedure associated with that role. So I had no idea who this guy was. So I want to know who he is, what procedures does he work with, who appointed him, etc. So I wrote that to him on the 5th of April, and I heard nothing back. I tried again on the 7th of April, it's 2 days later, and again they had funny addresses, so I was trying to find is this the Tony Downs I was looking for, and I referred him to the email which I'd sent earlier. Again, I got no response to this, so by just trying to trace through here, on the 8th of April then, on a second reminder, I again wrote to this guy Tony Downs, and I pointed out to him that this delay in my getting an answer from certainly eroded what was left of my residual trust that I'd have in any independent review in relation to my process. Again, I said I wasn't receiving any bounce backs to my emails, so I presumed they were delivered. So then on the 8th of April, a number of days later then, from my first email to him on the 5th, I think, on the 8th of April at 17:31. And yet again, viewers, I'd like you to take into account, yet again, we seem to be constantly dealing with higher civil servants who seem to be working late into the evenings, and I have expressed my views around that whole area, especially when I look at the massive ineffectiveness that my research essentially exposes. So he said, my name is Tony Downs, I'll be carrying out the review of your application. I've just started to read through the documentation, wanted to familiarise myself with everything before contacting you. I'll contact you early next week once I've read all the documentation. Once again, completely disregarded the request I'd made of him. Absolutely. So I didn't hear any more from Tony Downs. So I emailed him again on the 11th of April at 15:57, acknowledging the receipt of his previous email, and again stating out the questions that I had asked him originally when he answered him. Give me the data set you're working on and explain to me what your role and the references to which define the independence or procedures involved with that role. So again, didn't hear any more from Tony. And to be honest, I didn't have a lot of faith in what was coming down the line. Anyway, I got a call then, I think out of the blue, on the 22nd of April. So that's 11 days later, I get this call from Tony Downs. So it's a long conversation. I intend to break it up into a number of parts. And yet again, I'd like you, the viewer, to just watch out for what I call these systemic organisational behavioural fractals that I seem to experience from people in power dealing with essentially a vulnerable citizen like me. Just a point Tony has made there. He talks about some code of practice and a letter I was sent. So I was sent a letter, but not on the 14th of March. I was purportedly sent a letter by snail mail on the 14th of March, which never reached me, and of which I have no proof was ever sent, and which critical information appears to have gone walkabouts in. And in that letter, so I got an email copy of this letter. So it shows me a link, but it's not active. It's not a hyperactive link. So I have traced that link down there, and just to see where it brings me, where it brought me was onto this page here talking about section 7 reviews, etc. But I had no idea this was part of some sort of overall code of practice. Like, nothing in the original note that I got suggested to me. Let's just have a look at them. It talked about informal reviews, detail of procedure, but I didn't know it was any overarching process or otherwise. So this is important because at some stage later it's going to be alluded to the fact that in some way Tony Dunn seemed to be under the illusion that I knew what was in this document. Let's continue with Tony now. Yeah, just I know I had to interrupt there, but I just realised, this again, the way this stuff is presented, as if I was told. For your interest, viewer, again, I have posted the video of the recording of that initial conversation I had on the 7th of March with Marcella Joyce, and I invite you to go there and to come up with any inclination whatsoever that this person in any way supported or did anything other than inhibit the idea that I might believe I had the possibility of getting a review or appeal of the decision in relation to my job interview. So I'm not really sure. This guy's just after telling me his role is to review documentation. That's what he's after saying now. That expands somewhat later on. So please understand that if I'm very dubious in terms of what's going on here. So just to say the details in this document below here, that's the reminder document I'd sent to Tony Downs on the 8th of April. And, you can look at those as we're listening to the video, me asking the obvious questions about, you know, where do I get the sense of credibility, etc. from you. So he should have really provided this information for me in advance so I could be prepared. I'm completely unprepared for this phone call from this guy. Okay, just to say, this is the 17th of May 2016. That conversation took place on the 22nd of April. It's almost a month ago. Tony Downs never sent me this correspondence or the link to this code of practice. In fact, I was just given a link to this earlier this week by the customer relations officer Ken Kennedy, who's I think it was relatively recently. Let me just say when exactly that was. So just pause there to check out. It was on an email I received from Ken Kennedy on the 11th of May, so it's 6 days ago. It was the first time I actually was sent a link and a specification about this idea of a code of practice document. So I wouldn't have, but it's important. Tony Downs again undertook to send this to me. Never heard from him since. This all is very important in terms of me having any credibility in any of these people or their professionalism. So we've moved from his original specification, which was to review the documentation, and now he's in some way expanded this into talking to me and to the interviewers. Um, to be honest with you, therefore, it's hard for me to work out if this is just a makey-uppy job. I haven't seen anything. I haven't gone through that yet to see. I think it's important that I come in here and just say again, this guy Tony Downs has never once wavered from his absolute belief that it was issued from the Central Statistics Office. So no one within Central Statistics has ever considered the possibility that for whatever reason this document was not ever posted. So therefore it's reasonable for me to assume that this is actually in the hands of somebody else in the country now. But it's interesting, they're not even capable, give no process of assurance that this thing was sent, but they have a complete belief that it was. I mean, what is the fractal gap that's in there? Now, as we go into this little soliloquy or whatever, or it's almost like a confused dialogue here, I think I've asked a very specific question about the person did the interview handing over their originals and keeping a copy for themselves. Now I'm not really sure how bad a communicator you have to be not to make that clear. But as we see this next segment here, for whatever reason, he doesn't seem to be on the same page. Let's have a listen to it. Sorry, just again, he said that's in accordance with the way things are done here. I hope I misunderstand you, Tony. I hope you're not saying that things are done here by just putting originals into envelopes. I can't believe you'd regard that as a standard of behaviour. I just can't. So I just have to work on the assumption that there was a misstatement by Tony there. I just picked it up as I was listening to it. Okay, this is real important again. This is just complete bluffing. I understand that this is something to do with a separate investigation you have with freedom of information. This is complete and absolute bluffing. I mean, if you don't know something, you should say what you're talking about. This is just complete stabbing in the dark here. There's nothing to do with it. Okay, that's. I'm just going to finish up there that section as part one of this conversation. I think there'll be approximately two more equally lengthy parts of it, and we're about to go into a different subject there. Just before I do, I just that element we were just talking about. This is the marking, the scoring matrix that I was provided with. These black sections that you're seeing here were supposedly supposed to be redacted, but as evidence shows, the CSO don't seem to be capable of using spreadsheets and actually redacting or blackening out data. Now, given that spreadsheets are sort of a core operating skill of a massive organisation like the CSO, there are serious questions here about systemic skill sets, etc. But you can see here, Val McBride specifically said, if I had this data, which you can see there's code numbers on Thursday and Friday, that if I had this in some way, this would break the bank and expose all these people's details. This is just complete, bizarre, vacant, negative, defensive thinking. So anyway, join me again for the second part on Does It Matter, the research program. Okay.